What is up, guys? Florida Man Does Weather back with another forecast video. This time we're going to be focusing on the severe weather threats for May 15th, 16th, 17th. We'll touch on the 17th because that one's a little bit more shaky. And then uh, what's the next day after the 17th? The 18th,
18th.
and then the 19th.
A
So
lot of
right
weather
now,
coming.
a lot of stuff. We got some severe weather ongoing right now. We got a tornado warning out in west central to western Nebraska. That's landspouts going off along the southern edge of this larger complex. Your 500 millibar flow has yet to really fully kick out into the region, but it will tomorrow. And Wisconsin, I think you guys are going to have some problems to deal with, maybe even into northern Illinois and Indiana. So I'll start this off with the moisture plume just so we can see how things are really working up. So this is like 7 a.m. Central Time. And then we get into the afternoon, and you can really see this warm front races in. Your cold front is back in here, and you've got plenty of moisture for storms. And one other thing that is really supporting this is your little 500 millibar trough. You got quite a negative tilt there, quite the jet streak working in, broad diffluence in this region. So things are guaranteed to fire into southeast Minnesota, Wisconsin, maybe even parts of northeast Iowa if this goes early. This run of the hrrr initiates storms way too late, in my opinion. I think these are probably going to get going by like 1 or 2 p.m. Central Time. And when they do, they will get going fast. These are quickly going to build up a strong, significant hail threat. And likely we are going to have a couple of significant tornadoes out there. So just for demonstration's sake, I want to take a little modeled sounding real quick just to show you what we're working with. So that 500 millibar jet streak is well represented in here. You've got a very strong low-level mass response. Your low-level jet really starts to kick in. You've got those southeast surface winds, so you've got strong enough shear for supercells right off the bat. And anything that can really get going closer to that warm front, because these are going to be moving pretty fast off of there. But I do think everything will translate as far as the warm front and the cold front. They will translate fast enough to keep everything within that warm sector. So I'll advance this just a little bit more so you can see how that moves. So it starts to really pinch off as your low kind of occludes. Your surface low is way back here in the southeastern tip of North Dakota, but it's still going to impart plenty of forcing and shear for supercells. And initially, I was worried that these were going to be initially discrete supercells and then form into just a band. Even if it did that, there is still plenty of shear to support embedded supercell structures and tornadoes within mesovortices within any linear structure. But at this point, I think it's going to be an arc of very small supercells. So we got to watch out for any little storm mergers or storm interactions that can happen that could spit out a strong tornado. But I believe at this point it should be showing the low level shear. It's not really depicting the low level shear quite as good as some of the previous runs, but it is the most updated run that goes out the furthest right now. So take that with a grain of salt. Know that you will have plenty of low level shear for tornadoes within this environment. And then I do want to talk about northern Illinois, northern Indiana, because things have become a little bit more consistent with the storm's ability to fire over there. I do think southern Indiana, despite all the energy in the atmosphere down there, you're probably not going to see any sustained convection. Something will try to fire, guaranteed, but I honestly don't think it'll stay sustained. Reasons why: you've got that really strong capping that's likely going to be in place. And this is also going to be a day of type of thing to look at because I want to see some soundings first because I don't really trust the models that much anymore. But I just don't think they're going to fire and sustain long enough to really take full advantage of this environment because we've got a crazy environment out there. When you start having mixed layer cape values in the 4,000s, that is explosive thunderstorm
Yeah.
growth if you get a storm. I just think that there's going to be too much warm, dry air up here for anything to really get going. And if it does get going, it's closer to nighttime. So you've got the nocturnal inversion kicking in anyway. So anything that's not already like a mature supercell is really going to start to die out. Again, I do think if you get one going, it could be a big time hail producer, big time tornado producer, but I just have my doubts on anything getting going. But for Northern Illinois and Northern Indiana, something's cooking. The HRRR and the European model seem to be in a little bit more agreement on a single sustained supercell translating across that area. And the reason why is because you've got a little bit better forcing. So the way these jet streaks work, you can break them into quadrants. The left exit region is favorable for ascent. The right entrance region, which would be down here, also favorable for ascent. But over here in the right exit and the left entrance, not as favorable. You get mostly sinking air. So with that northern Illinois area, you have this broader jet streak embedded within the flow, and it's got a little bit wider of a left exit region, and I think that will be enough to overcome some of the capping concerns. So it's still there. You're getting a glancing blow from it, and then the core of that jet streak kind of forms down here to the south over Missouri, Arkansas. So that's going to sustain your overnight convection over there. But I just starting to think there's something there. There's something to watch for. So keep an eye out because anything that develops up there, it's a more volatile environment from an instability perspective than you've got in Wisconsin. And honestly, some better shear vectors for discrete supercells. So if anything goes, it will likely be a very strong right mover moving almost due east if it's really latching into that streamwise vorticity that's available, and you'll have a major storm. But let's go to Josh. He'll talk about the Friday threat, and it starts with Thursday's overnight period.
Yep. And like you were saying, Caleb, as that low pressure system moves to the north and the uh, the two jet streaks start to separate a little bit, you've got the difluence on the right side, but that streak that's embedded in the flow, that lower one, starts to kind of pivot and become more west to east oriented. And like you're saying, anything that forms that gets embedded in that flow, it's going to be flowing probably to the from the south southwest to the north northeast, or from the west to the east. Do you want to advance it a little bit into the daytime so we can take a look? Okay, so this is your 18Z, and you've got your northern streak that's with the low that's pulled up towards the Great Lakes region, but this streak that's below it, that's in the flow, really gets spread out. You've got across the Rust Belt, the Corn Belt, you've got this really broad 500 millibar jet streak of about 60 to 75 knots across the whole region, basically flowing from the south southwest to the north northeast. You gonna go ahead and give us a sounding?
Yes, sir. Let me change regions real quick.
As you can see, that moisture plume just surges in, line it up with that flow.
I'll do the boot heel of Missouri.
Feels good. So there you go. You've got surface capes of over 4,100 and mixed level capes, mixed layer capes of 2,900, almost 3,000. Uh, your shear is very well embedded. Not as much veering as on Thursday. Everything is kind of almost. It's a little more linear, but it's still got enough veering where it can't be considered speed shear. It is definitely still directional shear. It's very broad. You've got surface winds from looks like 30 knots all the way up to your 500 millibar, which has it up to about 65. Some pockets up to 75. Really good sounding there. You've got an inversion there, but it looks like the the partial motion will be able to completely overcome that. Uh, you want to go ahead and give us a real quick a simulated reflectivity, so we can take a look at that. This is at what 12Z? Oh, it's 19.
Yeah, that was 18Z Friday.
Yeah,
So we'll push through Thursday. These are just your advection showers,
right.
some stuff in the morning as the warm front moves up. And then now we're getting into that Thursday time frame. So that, not 100% sure what that is. I don't think that
That
would
looks
be
like a weak
anything too
MCS. The
significant.
thing's trying to Triple R's trying to pick up on a weak MCS there. It looks like
Yeah,
now this right here,
there's
as you
that
go into
supercell.
yep, that's that supercell, and like you said, you've got this system pushing across Kentucky, that MCS that it tries to form. But as you go through the night on Friday, you've got these cells firing off that are run through the boot heel of Missouri, and that cluster starts pushing through by 12Z. You've got them in Western Kentucky, and they start growing as they move into that environment. Um,
Strong Boeing structures. Wow.
yes, now it's going to be picking up on an MCS, but these triple R given on that initial cluster, okay, given those multiple Boeing segments right there, you can have a high wind threat, especially when you have a jet between 65 and 75 knots at the mix at the mid levels. Um, and shear is sustained throughout the system. You could definitely be seeing some significant straight line winds at the stronger storms. Also, I do believe that the possibility does exist for some bookend tornado threats at the ends of those veering profiles as that system pushes across the northern Kentucky, southern Ohio, and moves off to the east.
Especially when you've got an almost 45 to 50 knot low level jet at the 850 millibar level, basically feeding into those storms. So
Right
we'll have
into
to
it.
watch for any rear inflow jet development because that'll be able to overcome your nocturnal inversion easy.
Absolutely. Can you go ahead and push that to 19Z?
Only goes out to 18, but
Okay. Well, that works. So as you can see, that's the next round. That'll be in the afternoon. So that's about 1300. Well, so it'll be about 1 p.m. on Friday. You've got the next complex of storms pushing in. You got two clusters there, one in Missouri, one in starting to move into Kentucky there, Western Kentucky. Um, these look good. The one to the left kind of hits to me that it's going to try to stay more of a linear mode. You've got a lot of convection clustered closely together. That's not to say that you can't see some embedded supercells, especially on the tail end. Like the left side, you may get what they call tail end Charlie, which is a supercell that's just running uncontested and it's feeding into that and feeding off that environment to the south of it. Um, I'm very interested though is what is going on in front of that line, that cluster that's to the west in Western Kentucky. There may be some interesting things happening there, as you've got a complex of potential supercells, but they're not really competing with anything. You've got surface cape. The HRRR is estimating of 4,300 with mixed layer at 3,700. Those are absurd numbers. Um, You have a Tor analog sounding on there. You've got excellent veering. You've got 500 millibar shear at a solid that looks like 70 to 75 knots. Uh, you could definitely add looking not just in regards to the tornado threat with the veering profile. You've got a dry layer at the 700 millibar level, which that is just tapping into that 500 millibar jet. You also have a significant threat of wind gusts up to 70 miles an hour with this set of storms as well, if they are to manifest.
and another little caveat with this is at this point, that overnight, not overnight really, but that Thursday system, that cold front stalls out and becomes more of a warm front. So
So
you
it'll be
get,
playing along that boundary.
yeah, so those are definitely something to watch, especially as you got this deeper moisture running in. So you've got kind of multiple pseudo boundaries in there.
And it's almost like 'cause you've got that kink right there. So it's almost like you've got a warm front, pseudo cold front setup happening again right there over Missouri. And it's teasing that maybe that pseudo triple point, not a true triple point, but that pseudo triple point forcing may be what fires off those two secondary rounds of storms that come off of Missouri and move into Kentucky. So those will be very interesting to watch as we get closer to Friday.
Yes, sir. So now let's talk Saturday. Saturday's murky waters to me. So we've got all this ongoing convection on Friday, and then you've got the secondary impulse that goes in. But at this point, this region is really pretty much behind that moisture because it's all locked into this area, as you saw with those 60 dew points are really kind of confined. They're still creeping in. So you might get enough of a air mass recovery to support storms. This looks to me like almost a dry line, a little bit diffuse in spots, but um, I do think you will get some type of air mass recovery. The question is, where do these storms want to end up firing? Because there are going to be some remnant boundaries, I think, off of that cluster of storms once it goes linear, or if it goes linear, because the ARRR seems to think it won't. But we'll see what happens with Saturday. Saturday's a little bit more uncertain, in my opinion, but I would think if anything were to happen, it's probably going to include that Dallas metro and in this region. Sunday, however, Sunday, Monday, I know in the last video we were talking about those being a little bit more uncertain, but I'm starting to think we've got something cooking there. So you see this big trough come in, and we've almost got two little 500 millibar competing contours,
Rapidly
and
deepening.
mad deepening on these. So you're going to have this broader flow really overspread the region. You're definitely going to have a dry line in there because you're going to have moisture return. So it's going to shove that thing back. And I do think you will see warm sector development. We've got a broad enough bit of diffluence across this region to where Sunday you could see some really explosive supercell growth as we get into that magic initiation hour in Oklahoma, 4 or 5 p.m. That's usually when these will go off. So if anything happens to that effect on this day on Sunday, definitely watch out because these are going to have a lot to work with. Right now, I'm looking at the low level jet. So just to gauge the response you're going to see. So that low level jet really starts to kick up into the overnight as you get a new broad cyclogenesis right around the Rockies. And Oklahoma is very much in play. There might be a little bit of a veering issue in some areas when your low level jet tends to kind of align with that 500 millibar flow a little bit more. You get a little bit weaker shear, but we're definitely going to see storms initiate at least with a large hail threat because we're going to have such a reservoir of instability in the area that any storm that pops up is going to be a giant hail producer. You've got plenty of shear for supercells already. So massive hail, it's already a big concern, especially for these areas because they've had like weeks of hailstorms accompanied with flooding rains last month. So get ready to have even more damage to your cars, your roofs, your siding. And then as we go into Monday, pretty much a rinse and repeat. You're probably going to see some new areas kick off. I would say this whole area is probably in play to a lesser extent up here. This looks like it's getting a little bit cut off with your warm front. But if we see another nocturnal low level jet response, I think we do. I think it'll pick up on it a little bit more because now we're out ahead of 120 hours. So the models are going to do what they do with that.
Yep.
But, if this picks up more, which I believe it will, we've got another continued severe weather risk likely for pretty much the same regions in the south,
Yep.
Oklahoma, Texas, and then you really expand up into Kansas, maybe even parts of Nebraska. This would be large hail, strong damaging winds, tornado threat once again, just all still supporting supercells because you got to remember that 500 millibar flow is still coming out of the southwest moving northeast at this point. So
And
there's
over the
still
weekend, as more data comes in, we'll be going ahead and we'll be doing another video breaking that down as we get closer to the main event. So Saturday, Sunday, look for another video. We'll be dropping one of those as well.
Mhm.
Anything
In the
else you want to add
meantime,
to Caleb?
keep your eyes out, especially Wisconsin. Tomorrow, I think, has a lot of potential to be a pretty tornadic day up there in a way you guys haven't experienced in a minute. Um, Northern Illinois, watch out. Rest of Illinois, sort of watch out. But I'll be at Rockville, sweating and enjoying music. So we'll still get these updates out though. Don't worry.
Absolutely, we will. Yep. Everyone, you have a good evening.
Enjoy the night, guys.